Good morning, Griffins. I hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday. Hopefully, things are going all right for you. We'll jump over and do a quick prayer before we get started. This is the one I picked out for you today. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, let nothing disturb you, nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God is unchanging. Patience gains all. Nothing is lacking to those who have God. God alone is sufficient. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. I think that's a good prayer. Just got to be patient, Might be getting a little stir crazy, but you just got to be patient out there. And, for all these lunatics, these nut jobs out there protesting in front of hospitals, wow, that's bad stuff. So, you just got to be patient, have faith in God. Things are going to work out okay. Let's jump over to classroom. Start getting through these notes. Make sure my audio level here is fine. Yeah, it looks all right. All right, the notes from yesterday. Here they are. It's about mostly criminal offenses. In fact, entirely about criminal offenses. Criminal offenses are classified into two separate categories. Misdemeanors are your minor crimes. They're punishable normally by a fine or maybe a short-term imprisonment in a local jail. Usually up to a year would be about the most you'd see for a misdemeanor. But in most situations, misdemeanors are just simply a fine. As in, you probably wouldn't even have to attend your court date. You could just mail your fine in to the, the county clerk, and that would settle the matter. So that would involve offenses like jaywalking, speeding, small theft, these are minor crimes where you don't really see that there's a clear victim or a clear danger to the safety of the public. Jaywalking, I guess you would be the victim if you jaywalked and got hit by a car, but it represents a very minimal endangerment to the public. Speeding, you're going 5 miles over on Meridian Road, which is bizarrely a 30-mile-an-hour road. Still don't really get that. You're not typically endangering a whole lot of people by going a couple miles over. Now, if you were going 20 over or 30 over, that's where, obviously the fine is going to be ramped up based on the severity of your crime. But I think in the state of Illinois, it's impossible to speed to a level where you'd become a felon. I think all speeding offenses are misdemeanors, but the more you're going over, 20 or 30 over, that's when it becomes, your Class A misdemeanors, and the fine is pretty incredible. And also your insurance would just screw you over for a good length of time. In fact, the only ticket I ever got was a speeding ticket. It was in Wayne County, Illinois on the interstate. I was driving to Louisville and was going 20 over, or it was like 22 over. That's too fast. There's like nobody out there on the interstate, so I felt like I was like driving at a safe speed, but that's too fast for the interstate. And that fine, I believe, was a couple $100. So don't do that. It screwed with my insurance for a long period of time too. So my insurance was much more expensive because of that speeding ticket. But nonetheless, it was a misdemeanor. So it's on my driving record, but it's not something like if I apply for a job, I don't have to tell them, back in, I think it was 2010, I was going 20 over on the interstate in Wayne County. Now, a felon, a convicted felon, someone who's committed a serious crime and probably done some time in the big house in a state or federal prison, that's going to be something that kind of haunts you. It follows you around. It's on your record. You have to report it when you're applying for jobs, things of that matter. And yes, an employer could just go, I don't want to hire this person. They, on their application, straight up said they're a convicted felon. Maybe they burned a building down. Maybe they murdered someone. These are serious crimes. These cases almost always have a jury. You're not just going to be able to mail in your ticket or something like you could with a misdemeanor. It's almost always going to have a defendant present in a courtroom with prosecutors prosecuting them and your defense attorney trying to convince the jury that you didn't do it. So convicted felons are going to not be able to buy a firearm. You can't vote in a lot of states if you're a convicted felon. So misdemeanors are your small level crimes where there's a minimal threat to the safety of people. Petty theft. This he's got the milk duds here. He's stealing the milk duds. It doesn't really endanger anyone in particular. Who's the victim here? I guess the milk dud company or the owner of this gas station, I guess, would be the victim. If you add a gun into the mix, though, let's say he's holstering a firearm here, then that's going to ramp things up. Typically, all misdemeanor offenses, if you happen to have a gun with you when you commit them, are automatically now going to be a felony. So adding a gun to the mix, pretty much always, it endangers the public if you have a firearm while you're committing a crime. So it's almost always going to ramp it up into a felony because of the just present danger to the public. A clear and present danger, as they call it. Possession of illegal drugs or paraphernalia to use illegal drugs, like a crack pipe or something like that. Those are most commonly, misdemeanor level offenses. If you possessed large quantities of an illegal drug, if you had like a whole truck full of it, that would probably show that you had intent to distribute it and were like a drug dealer or drug trafficking across state lines. Those would be felony situations. A damage to property. This guy's about to take a little swing with the baseball bat here. Property damage is usually a misdemeanor. And in this case, since he's damaging a mailbox here, that's federal property, so it actually would be a federal crime. This would go to a federal courtroom, but it still nonetheless would be a misdemeanor because most mailboxes aren't worth more than $500. If you did property damage that exceeded $500, it would automatically become a felony, whether it was committed against federal property or otherwise. A felony, this guy here, it's from a great movie by Quentin Tarantino, Inglourious Bastards. Put that on your viewing list. It's kind of a fun little alternative history type movie. So this guy here, he's about to take a big old swing at this Nazi general. That would be a felony. Hitting somebody in the head with a baseball bat and killing them, that's murder. If didn't kill them, it's still assault with a deadly weapon. So that's going to be, this is obviously a clear victim here with this guy and a clear endangerment to his safety. Pop over to the chat here, see what's going on. Looks like we got a couple folks in here this morning. Thank you for joining. I appreciate that, guys. Cool. Let's jump back in and get through these quickly here. Driving under the influence in a lot of states is a felony. There's a clear and present danger to people's safety because people that are drinking and driving, can't operate their vehicle safely. It's a cause of, nasty collisions out there on the roadways. So it's a felony in most states because it's an obvious risk to the public's safety. Stabbing someone or murdering someone, that's going to be a felony. This guy's telling you, don't mind me, just making a PBJ, so perhaps his defense attorney could convince the jury otherwise, but, that's a clear and present danger to someone's personal safety. Stabbing them is. The differences in your imprisonment length for misdemeanors, again, you're going to see typically it's fine only until you get to some of the more serious misdemeanors, a Class 1 or Class 2 misdemeanor, where you could serve potentially up to a year in a local county jail. You wouldn't go to a prison, you'd go to a jail. There's a difference there. Felons, however, if you're convicted of a felony, in pretty much all cases, you will serve time in a prison, the big house. So these penalties and lengths are going to vary from state to state. In some cases, a crime is a Class 1 misdemeanor, while in other cases, you might find that it's a Class 6 felony. So it varies from state to state if you're in a state courtroom. But these are the federal guidelines. So if you were in a federal courtroom, this would be it. It wouldn't vary. Excuse me. So more severe the crime, the more severe the punishment you'd face. Perhaps even up to the death penalty in states that allow it. Don't believe Illinois allows the death penalty anymore. Let's Google that. All right, state by state. Illinois, no death penalty. Abolished in 2011. If you want to cross the border over to Missouri, though, you'd find that they still have the death penalty. So let's say you didn't actually complete your crime. You conspired to rob a bank, but were stopped before you actually robbed it. Or let's say you attempted to murder someone, but they lived. The imprisonment for these types of situations would be seen here. So if the maximum penalty for completing the felony, as in murdering someone, carries the death penalty in a lot of states, it would instead be life in prison if you attempted it but didn't complete the job. A conspiracy would be multiple people. So if a conspiracy would be, 2 or 3 people or more than that conspiring together to commit a crime but not completing it. There's the notes from yesterday. I encourage you to watch this video. I'm afraid if I share it, though, my YouTube channel will get flagged. So encourage you to look at that. Here's another thing I dropped in here on misdemeanor and felony traffic offenses. So this is the most common interaction between people and the police. It's really been my only interaction is through traffic offenses, getting pulled over. You have obviously constitutional rights from Amendments 4 through 8 that protect you. But, certain things are going to be a traffic felony, repeat DUI or a gross or aggravated DUI, manslaughter charges, vehicular homicide, hit and run. Don't do it. Don't panic and drive off if you hit somebody else's car. Stick around because running away from a scene of the crime would ramp your situation into a felony. Then you'd be a convicted felon, wouldn't be able to get a job as easy, couldn't vote. So don't run from the scene of a crime because that's going to turn you into a potential, a felon in a lot of states. Fantastic. Let's jump into the notes for today. So again, courts are separated into federal courts and state courts. The cases that would start in a federal courtroom are pretty specific, as in you'd need to commit the crime on federal property or an Indian reservation. So you'd need to commit a crime like in a post office. That's federal property. You need to commit a crime like inside the Gateway Arch. That's federal property. Commit a crime at a national park, out at Yellowstone, something like that, or land between the lakes. That's federal property. Maybe you're out on the res. Maybe you're out there in Arizona and you're on the res and you commit a crime. Well, your case is going to be qualified as a federal crime. Other crimes that are within federal jurisdiction would include things like mail fraud, manufacturing, importing, or exporting controlled substances, as in drugs, hijacking an aircraft. A variety of charges in here. Identity theft, a lot of computer crimes, a lot of mafia-related crimes like racketeering, tax evasion. These are going to be handled in a federal courtroom because it'd be kind of unfair to make a state handle, like espionage charges. Be like, all right, Georgia, every time someone spies on the United States, Georgia, you're going to take those cases. Like, it would be unfair to Georgia to make them take all spy-related cases. So instead of making a state handle these things, because they're really wide-scale criminal offenses, they would go into a federal courtroom. And since 1965, assassinating the president or vice president's a crime. So they changed that after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. A couple years later, they decide, we should probably make assassinating the president a crime. Sounds like a good idea. Prior to that, they just charged the guy with murder. Here's Tekashi 6ix9ine. He's a rapper who's, he faced charges in a federal courtroom because he was charged with racketeering, as well as some gun crimes, which again ramped things into a felony when guns are involved. Racketeering is a type of crime associated with organized crime, as in the mob or the mafia or gangs. And typically what happens is they are going to local businesses and bullying them into paying the mob money for protection. It's protection from the mob. They basically say, pay us to protect yourself from us. He agreed to a plea bargain, in which case I think he ratted out some people, and that lowered his sentence. But he is serving time in the big house. He's in a federal prison. Again, just another example of federal crimes seen here. These would end up in a federal courtroom, and state crimes. If you murder someone, that's just going to be handled in an Illinois state courtroom. Federal crimes would include terrorism. Again, it would be unfortunate just to go like, all right, Delaware, you're going to handle every case that involves terrorism. We can't just make one state handle such a broad issue that affects the whole country. So instead, this would be handled in a federal courtroom. It's called mail fraud, Jerry. For all my Seinfeld fans out there. 4 presidents have been assassinated. And out of those, you'd hope to go out in style like Garfield. He's got a little bit of the, oh, my hip. He's going out in style. So unlike Lincoln, who was just shot point blank in the head, that's not a good way to go. After him would be Garfield. He was shot by a guy who was disappointed that Garfield hadn't nominated him into a diplomat position. This guy was disgruntled. Later discovered he probably had syphilis, which was driving him insane. William McKinley, he was shot by a guy point blank in the gut. This guy was an anarchist and just decided he was going to take it out on the president. John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. So we think from the evidence out there. That's what the Warren Commission found. Oswald probably acted alone, but there's so many conspiracies out there. Read into that. It's just kind of fun to see all the different theories out there on why John F. Kennedy was assassinated and perhaps who was involved other than Oswald. In my opinion, I think it was just Oswald. I think he was a disgruntled guy. He had lived in the Soviet Union. He was a sympathizer for communist Cuba and just felt JFK was a hardline, anti-communist president, so he decided he was going to assassinate him. Rights of the accused. You have a lot of rights, mostly coming from the Constitution, the amendments 4 through 8, but there's also some other things in there that have just been kind of accepted over time. The writ of habeas corpus, that prevents a prisoner from being held without reason. They can't just throw you in a jail and say, sorry, we're throwing everybody in jail today that's named Jerry. That would be illegal. They have to charge you with an actual crime to hold you in a jail. They could, release you, and prosecutors, if they found evidence later on that a crime may have been committed, they could later decide to bring charges against the suspect, but they can't just hold you in jail for no reason. An ex post facto law. That's something we've talked about in the legislative branch, which is you can't retroactively punish someone for something that was legal when they did it. Exclusionary rule. That forbids illegally gained evidence from being used in court. It also states that, warrants are not necessary when a police officer is a witness to a crime. So they don't need a warrant. If they drive by your house and see you standing in the front window, smoking a crack pipe, then they don't need a warrant to come in. They are a witness to a crime. They can come right in and will. However, if they didn't witness anything, they'd need a warrant to enter your house, to search your vehicle, to search your pockets or your personal space. So they would need a warrant. Warrants are issued by judges. So a police officer would have to get in contact with a judge, get a warrant issued, and then they could search your home or, your personal effects. The exclusionary rule deals with wiretapping as well. Agencies and officers could wiretap you, but they'd need a warrant to do so. If they wiretapped you just willy-nilly without a warrant, that evidence could not be used in court. It would be excluded due to the exclusionary rule. So no, the government can't just constantly listen in through your Alexa or whatever, or through Siri. They can't just listen in to everybody in the hope that you eventually commit a crime, because whatever evidence they gleaned from wiretapping you and listening in, that evidence couldn't be used in a courtroom. The CSI folks in real life, it's not really like what you see in TV. these guys have very strict requirements, lots of training to make sure they don't accidentally tamper or contaminate evidence, or sometimes the police, they lose evidence, which is kind of suspicious, but it's happened before. And so most local police forces, like your Edwardsville police, they would just have an officer take photographs of the crime scene. They'd collect any notable evidence, put it in a bag. They'd interview any witnesses, and then they just call it a day. That's it. That's going to be their evidence right there. So local officers, they rely a lot on witness statements and depositions from the officer who arrived first, things like that. The high-tech stuff you see in TV and movies, that's mostly reserved for federal agencies like the FBI, or state police like your Illinois Staties. Those guys would have access to a lot more high-tech types of investigation, DNA testing, things of that nature. The exclusionary rule means that police officers have to be careful about how they gather their evidence. They also need to respect the fact that they need a warrant to do a lot of things. They can't just pull you over and start digging through your trunk because they want to. So you do have a right to refuse search. And, that can irritate some police officers because they just want to get their job done and get back out on the road. But that's the Constitution for you. It's not made for convenience. It's made to protect people's natural rights. O.J. Simpson. His trial was obviously extremely controversial. There was DNA evidence, that directly linked him to the scene of the crime, as in they found his blood, and they tested it and said, yeah, he was there, and was bleeding when the crime happened. And his defense team, because he's a millionaire ex-NFL player, he's got all the money in the world. His defense team, made up of Robert Kardashian, managed to convince the entire jury that the evidence was contaminated. You can't trust this DNA stuff. It's rigged against me. And the jury actually believed the defense team when it was pretty clear that the evidence was probably not contaminated, and again directly linked him to the death and murder of his ex-wife and her friend Goldman. A warrant would be issued for a variety of things. It could be issued to search your house. A warrant could be issued to arrest you. Say, in most cases, these arrest warrants are due to an outstanding bench warrant, as in you were supposed to appear in court and you didn't. The judge would say, it's the day of the trial, where is he? If you're not there, they would then issue an arrest warrant to bring you in, and then they would force you to go to this trial. So, the police, if they have if they come knocking on your door, it's usually because they don't have a warrant. If they had a warrant, they're not going to knock. They're going to bust right in there and knock your door down. So if the police are knocking at your door, be polite, but they typically in that situation don't have any right to enter your home, search your home, or do anything really other than just have a casual conversation with you. In fact, you don't even have to answer the door. But if a police officer wanted a warrant, he could call a judge on his cell phone and say, hey, give me a warrant to search this place, and the judge could just issue it through the phone right there. So if they have a warrant, they're not going to knock. They're going to bust in. This is an interesting case. Look at all this stuff in here. Oh my gosh. What a ridiculous situation. Police officer, seen here, Geiger, she gets home and gets to her apartment complex, and mistakenly, because she was tired, entered the wrong apartment, unit. As in she instead of going to her floor, accidentally took the elevator up to the floor or two above, and then entered in, where she normally would. And she saw a man in there and shot him, as though that would be the first thing you'd realize if you were entering an apartment that's clearly not yours. You go, man, this guy broke in and he bought a lot of new stuff and rearranged all my furniture. I better shoot him. It was just a ridiculous situation. She's doing some time in prison, so her defense team was not able to convince the jury that it was an accident. You don't typically just, break into an apartment and shoot someone and go, well, I thought it was my own apartment. I was just on the wrong floor. Like, yeah, that's kind of odd that you wouldn't notice immediately that it's not your apartment based on the stuff inside it, including a grown man who, it is what it is. It's look at the wiki article for that. It's ridiculous. I also sent you a video about O.J. Simpson and the rights of the accused, and this game here. This game's kind of fun. Perhaps you can check this thing out. I think somebody last year told me they had played this in middle school. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's just a little game about civil cases. So check that out. It's kind of fun. All right, let's jump over to the chat here, see what's going on. Thanks for the folks that joined us. That's really it for today. So those are the notes from yesterday and today. If you guys got questions, you can always just email me. So have a fantastic Tuesday, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.